Hey folks, Jimmy here, aka Palette of the Dead. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a festive painting video. Now, as per usual with all these videos, if you like them, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course drop a comment down below. I love hearing back from you guys, and it goes an absolute massive way to help the channel too. Now, in this painting video I wanted to show how I've gone about painting up the Red Gobbo on Bouncer, that lovely Christmas commemorative series mini. It is the third one that the third Christmas mini that I've picked up since I started kind of going back through all the painting. So I had the Red Gobbo when that came out a couple of years ago. I had good old Jakob Bugmanson last year, and this year the Red Gobbo on Bouncer, and I love this model. There's a lot of steps to this painting video, and it will keep us going for a while. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So I've started off with Mechanica Standard Grey as a base coat, and I am layering up the Red Gobbo's flesh with War Flesh. This is probably a little bit darker than most people would use for a grot, but I quite like it. I kind of think it looks alright. It looks pretty decent, and it does exactly the trick I wanted it to do. With all that done, even though the camera won't focus very well on it, I am using Army Painter's green skin over the main areas of the Red Gobbo's flesh, just not going into any recesses, so it still maintains that little darkness to it, and it makes his skin look a little bit brighter as well. And then once that was done, it's time to do a little tiny bit of edge highlighting using Orc Flesh, just to bring a little bit of brightness over things like the knuckles, certain areas of muscle definition, and of the good old ear tips and stuff like that as well, and kind of like the sides of his nose and his lips themselves as well. Then moving on to the coat, I'm using Corn Red. So he has a red coat, so it is time to have some red involved in the mini. So I'm layering over the entirety of this coat with Corn Red as a base layer, and it will work very, very nicely with the next steps. And then moving over, avoiding all the recess areas, I'm using Wazdaka Red. This brightens it up so much. You may need one or two shades if you do it in a very, very similar style, so you may need to do it layer over twice, but otherwise it's really quite good. I quite enjoyed it. I thought this stands out, it makes it look very nice. It has a bit of a uniqueness around it as well. And then moving on to Bouncer, I'm using Screamer Pink as a base layer. Now, coat pretty much the entirety of Bouncer using this. There are a few places where I probably should have used it, like inside of the mouth, but I chose not to. But doing it the same way that I've done it now, I think it still looks pretty decent, and it was a bit of a model that I really enjoyed. Once the Screamer Pink was dried up, I used Carroburg Crimson as a shade over the entirety of Bouncer, because it needs it, in all honesty. I thought this makes it look pretty decent, it makes it look very nice, and gives it a bit of that shading and colouring that it's really kind of desired. And then moving back to certain other areas of the Red Gobbo and Bouncer, I used Ratcar Flesh for the teeth. There is a reason for this. It's a bit dingy, it's not a bright white or anything like that, and it's not quite as bright as Wraith Bone is either, and I thought it looked just right. It kind of makes it stand out a little bit nicer. I also do this with Bouncer's mouth, and I painted up pretty much the entirety of its mouth using this same colour. Including all the gums, the inside of the mouth, the tongue, everything. It makes it kind of different, but nice once it's got a shade over it, so it does actually work pretty well. And then while I was doing that, I went back over with Screamer Pink over the main body of Bouncer. Now I do change this slightly later on to brighten him up a little bit better and kind of change his kind of skin tone, but doing this actually kind of worked and helped me out in a lot of ways, because it made me kind of help me to kind of decide what colour I want the squig to be. And then I decided to do a little bit of edge highlighting on the Red Gobbo's coat using Wild Rider Red. Just literally layering over every little kind of tiny areas, not the entirety of the model, and it kind of stands it out. It makes it look a little tiny bit more cartoonish, but he's a cartoonish character really, so it does work very, very well. And then I moved on back onto Bouncer, so I decided to go with what kind of a 50-50 mixture of Screamer Pink and Wild Rider Red to kind of produce a bit of a unusual flesh tone for a squig. It makes it look a bit different. It kind of does make it stand out. When it's dried, it looks very, very different from when it's wet, so it does dry a lot darker, but I think it kind of stands out a little bit more than Screamer Pink does, in my honest opinion. And then I used around about a 70-30 mixture in the favour of good old Wild Rider Red and Screamer Pink, just to kind of do them edge highlights, and it just changes it in a subtle way, which makes it stand out a little bit better. And as you can see in this shot as well, I have also done the inside of the mouth using Reichland the Flesh shade, which didn't do a lot for it, and it probably should have been done differently, which is why I now use Pixie Pink from Army Painter to do the gums. So he's got very bright pink vibrant gums for good old Bouncer, and it actually works. I think it kind of makes it stand out a little bit better, and it makes him kind of look a bit more nuts and a bit more bonkers, and it does make it kind of fit that cartoonish aesthetic as well. And now I am using Wraith Bone. I'm using Wraith Bone on the teeth, just avoiding the bases of the teeth as well, so they have that kind of shade, and it's like they are still a bit dark inside of the mouth and kind of towards the back of the teeth, especially in the gum areas, and it kind of just makes it stand out in my honest opinion. It brings that kind of a nice weird kind of colouring to the mouth area of Bouncer. And then it's time to do some leather work, so I'm using the Bad and Black just over things like the boots and the belts and straps and stuff like that, and I also use the same colour over the cabling for all the Christmas decorations lights that Bouncer has eaten. And as you can see, I have also used Blood Angel's red contrast paint for the tongue of Bouncer as well, just to make it, give it a bright colour, a bright vibrant red colour. And then doing the inside of the Red Gobbo's coat, I'm using Flayed One Flesh, which is a bit of an unusual stroke for me. Normally I'd go with using a white and then using something like Apothecary white over the top to grey it down, but I thought no, he needs to have a bit of a creamy colour and then it will look like sheep's fur, and it kind of does, it kind of works. So now all that pretty much is done, it is time to start painting up the base, or start thinking about painting the base at least anyway. So I am going over with good old Vallejo's Cold White over the entirety of the base to kind of give it a snowy feeling and a bit of a snow shade, and it will do exactly what you need it to do really. It does kind of does do the trick, in all honesty. And then I wanted Bouncer to have some kind of vibrant, kind of different coloured eyes, so I've used Avalanche Sunset for the actual eyeballs of Bouncer himself. And then moving on to the metalwork, I'm using lead belcher just over the kind of metal plate that he's holding onto his head, and as you can see, I've also used the cold white on the inside of the coat of the Red Gobbo as well, just layering it over as with a very, very fine dry brushing technique to kind of not take over too much from the actual flayed one flesh that you've used, and it stands out a little bit differently. Branch on the ground, Mornfang Brown. Dead simple, but it's effective at the same time. And then I've used Apothecary White over the base, which greys it down a bit. Once it's dry though, if you go back over with the white that you've used with a dry brush, it stands out. It makes it look like there's little pits in the snow, and it's not quite as just pristine snow, because it probably wouldn't be, because considering how many lumps there are around it. And it works. I mean, if you wanted to, you could use like one of the snow effects to kind of texture pastes or anything like that to kind of give it a bit more of an effect and change it up a little bit better as well. And then for the kind of antlers, I'm using Dryad bark. In all honesty, it works very, very well. Does exactly the trick, and as you will see, I've also painted that star white, and I have also done metalwork on all the baubles that are attached to the mini, and it's time to just paint them up how you want to paint them, really. For the kind of like the pine needles of the trees though, I'm using good old Warflesh again, and that gives it a dark green base coat, and then you can kind of just edge highlight at certain little pick out areas to kind of change the tone of that green on there as well, and it'll work very, very nicely. With things like the baubles and the lights and stuff like that, all I've done is, after painting them a metallic colour, I have literally just changed how they are by adding different kind of shades to them. So I'm using things like the contrast paints and bits and pieces like that to just pick out areas. So you can use your Volupus pink, good old Ethematic blue, when I can learn to say it, Creed camo, Griffhound orange, that type of thing, over different baubles, so they stand out quite nicely. They have a little bit of a shine to them because they're painted over a metallic, so they look metallic. If you want to get them a little bit more shiny, which is a trick, something that I'm going to do later on, use some gloss varnish over the top of it, and it will stand out even better and look a lot different as well, and look a bit more glassy, which will be the kind of way to do it. But that's it, really. I've really enjoyed the model. It's a little bit delicate in places, like that cabling that he's trailing from his mouth is delicate as hell. I'm not gonna lie, I've already broken it, which is kind of annoying, but a really fun model to paint, a very Christmassy model to paint, and yeah, an enjoyable one. Right, I'm gonna get going. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this painting video. If you had, let me know, but for now, enjoy your Christmas. I hope you get all the hobby goodies that you want, and I'll see you sometime just after Christmas. Bye bye now.